Day 732 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 410,000 military personnel losses. So that one represents an additional 880 in the past 24 hours. Then as for hardware losses, 13 tanks, 37 APVs, and just a measly 12 artillery. Then we'll head across to the map today and we'll start out in the Donbass and briefly look to the Bakhmut axis as Russian forces are attempting to capture Ivaniska. And when we zoom in, you might be able to see it's by way of encirclement, with taking up their most recent positions 500 meters closer, just to the north of the town. And this is where things get tricky for any invading force, if you can see it up real close. So we've got the canals to the west, we've got rivers to the east. So a lot of natural obstacles to contend with, really, in this region. Then we also saw the destruction of 2 Russian BMP-3s during these events. Then moving south, as the situation west of Avdiivka has been discrediting, with Russia taking up new positions as they seek to take full control for Severna. And given these latest developments, high-ranking officials including Commander-in-Chief Syrsky and Defense Minister Umarov visited the front lines to announce reinforcements. Also, their visit focused on analysing the situation and devising strategies for protection of troops from drone and airstrikes, alongside certainly strengthening certain frontline sections of the region. So there is all of that, and I would also postulate that General Syrsky is opting to focus on the preservation of soldiers' lives as the AFU wait for sufficient sustainment levels of munitions, such as the artillery shells. But we have to also look at the weather, because to add to all of that, so into the mix for this region is the winter thaw, where the Rasputitsa season comes for muddy conditions all around, making it difficult for any Grand Army to move around that much at all. And since Ukraine is a big place, these types of seasonal events happen at different times of the month, this month, next month, and the month after in the Donbass. But as for the Avdiivka axis, it appears the seasonal event is right around the corner. Then taking a look around, because somewhere in the east, let's see, so after explosions were reported in Russian-held Makivka, somewhat behind the front lines, a large fire started. Then also we saw a Russian tank blew up on a Ukrainian-placed mine. This one was near to Avdiivka. Then we also saw the case of Russian servicemen expecting their destroyed Giant S self-propelled gun. Then moving across a little bit to the west, as Ukrainian forces successfully countered multiple Russian assaults once again near Robotyne, including a significant engagement resulting in the destruction of a Russian platoon and all of its infantry fighting vehicles. Additionally, Ukrainian forces destroyed a retreating Russian armored vehicle after it hit a mine near Robotyne as well. But also, earlier in the morning, we saw an IR drone view, so an infrared drone view of Ukrainian forces destroying a retreating Russian MTLB after another failed assault, with this one said to have been running over a mine during its attempted retreat. Then moving across to a refresher update for the Ukrainian-held bridgehead at Krynky, just south of the Dnipro River. So zoom in for that one. As Ukrainian Marines contradicted Russia's claims of control for this region by capturing Russian soldiers, directly challenging statements made by Russia's defense minister Shoigu. Although, to be fair, when Shoigu announced that Russia had captured or regained control of Krynky just a few days ago, I'll never forget how he wasn't looking at his most confident. But it's not just Krynky where the activity is, because, for example, about 20 kilometers south from the front lines, the AFU destroyed a Russian KAMAZ truck with an installed Zala Lancet launcher for those Russian drones, with all of this happening just south of Radensk. And they're always hanging around Radensk, particularly the Russian drone operators. And there seems to be a real lack of communication among Russian forces in this region because it appears as if replacement units of Russian forces are time and time again just getting deployed to those very same spots over and over. Then just northeast of here, a HIMARS destroyed a Russian Mr. B towed howitzer near the settlement of Chelberda, which I've got to say is impressive for Russia, given that it was just 6 weeks ago we saw a noticeable absence of towed artillery pieces on the front lines getting destroyed. So not seeing Russian towed artillery pieces get destroyed, as it was believed that Russia since opted to replace worn-out SPG barrels with Soviet stockpiles of the towed artillery barrels themselves. But perhaps we're seeing a change of sentiment for the Russian army due to limited supply volumes or diminishing numbers of SPG's availabilities. And naturally, you're going to want to have the preference for an SPG over a towed artillery piece, as it's faster, more agile, more just better usability, better functionality, not to mention theoretically harder to target. Then we move across to Crimea as reports indicated explosions in Jankoy. And although we don't know yet the extent of what exactly happened here, possibly storm shadows or drone activity, that's not unusual at all these days. Although as you can see with the Telegram message that alerted us to this event, they also mentioned the recent closure of the Kerch Bridge. Sort of a self-imposed closure, if you will. Then also in Crimea, actually, you know what? I'll leave this next bit for the Russian hardware segment, as it is a news piece worthy of the segment name. But because we're right here, we'll take another brief look at a bit of a glimpse at the weekend that was. As in follow-up to the destruction of the second Russian A-50 radar plane recently. Now, the actual cause of the event, although still difficult to really 100% confirm, it more and more looks to be due to Patriot missiles. And something I'll say here, because to add to that, do you remember when Russia lost 3 Su-34 jets around Christmas Eve just last year? Well, just after that event, Zelensky immediately had glowing reviews about the superiority or the superior capabilities of these systems, that is to say the Patriot air defense systems. And just like 2 months ago, there he was at it again, just stating, just yesterday, that Ukraine seems to need just 10 Patriot air defense systems and 2 or 3 NASAMS to overcome Russian defenses. And he didn't stop there, as he went on to say, quote, "The Russians would retreat, we would break through their defenses and go forward." With him also noting that there is no alternative to the Patriot systems, emphasizing the critical role these systems would play in bolstering Ukraine's military capabilities against Russia. So he continues to speak very highly of these MIM-104 Patriot platforms, of which Ukraine currently has only 3 of them. But even with that very limited number, they seem to be performing very well. And with maybe 600 to 800 globally being operationally active and in service right now, it's fair to say Ukraine will receive some more. And I almost feel sorry for Putin at this point, because about 12 months ago, responding to the concept of Ukraine potentially receiving Patriots from their Western allies, where he had completely dismissed these air defense systems, calling them, quote, quite old. And he didn't seem to react to them at all as being some sort of military escalation, expecting the Russian military just to destroy them. So I bet he's eating his words now. Then headed across to some news for today. So starting off, we saw the transport of either Danish or Polish provided BTR armored personnel carriers as they were crossing Polish borders into Ukraine. Then, at the Ukraine Year 2024 Forum event over the weekend, Strategic Industries Minister Commission highlighted Ukraine's significantly enhanced capabilities for 2024 being 6 times higher than in 2023. Also, he mentioned with a threefold production in increase from 22 to 23. Which therefore means, so far, that's some exponential military production output growth right there. Commission also mentioned the increase in ammunition production and the upcoming introduction of ground drones as well. Then also at the forum, we heard from Defense Minister Umarov and Digital Transformation Minister Fedorov about efforts to achieve a breakthrough and technological advancements in drone operations. But then, head of Ukraine's military intelligence, Bordanov, not to be outdone by any of those statements, at least symbolically speaking, warned of new surprises for enemies in Crimea this year and advised against using the Crimean bridge due to some unspecified threats. So it looks like we're going to see some more activity on Crimea's Kerch Bridge this year, by the sounds of things. Then into some more news with tomorrow's probable upcoming ratification of Sweden's accession to NATO with Hungary's expected consent. Swedish opposition parties are applying pressure on their government to immediately start talks on the supply of the JAS-39 Gripens, the multi-role fighter aircraft. And so far, a majority in their parliament seems to support this move. Then to some Russian hardware news updates, as dozens of Russian T-62 MBTs, the main battle tanks, were spotted at the railway station in Yevpatoria of Crimea in the last day. As Atesh partisans recorded the movements of over 30 T-62 tanks arriving at the railway station. And as a quick refresher for these beasts, these tanks are actually as old as 62 years old, with the last one being built 49 years ago. And although Ukraine operates a handful of their own, the difference is night and day, with the Russian variants consistently lacking many or any upgrades, as they're simply refurbs designed to tick numbers off a sheet so that the Russian manufacturers can meet some basic tank quotas as they send them off to their Russian army in the field. Now, take for instance a Russian T-90 tank with its superior armor, at least in comparison, and typically this type of tank, the T-90, takes 2 FPV drones rammed straight into them to be destroyed. So there is zero chance that these lighter armored and mechanically defunct rust buckets will fare any better. But it's not just the T-62s we're seeing around the place, as there have been more of the even older T-55s spotted in direct combat in just 2024 alone, more than there ever was in 2023. So here they come, the Russian emergency stockpile tank reserves from yesteryear. Then headed to some other news. So in a move that surprised nobody, no one at all, Lukashenko intends to run for the president of Belarus for the 7th time in 2025. So Uncle Luka over here has been clinging to power for about 30 years, since 1994, which marginally outshines Putin's duration in power. And Uncle Luka appears to be running on an ethical political platform, as he stated that he wants to, quote, do what is right for Belarus. I'm sure you do. Then headed across to some other news. So in a revealing update from Ukraine, President Zelensky disclosed for the first time that 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died since the onset of the full-scale war with Russia over the past 2 years. Zelensky emphasized the significant loss each number represents to the nation, but he also stated that he wanted to set the record straight, as pro-Russian commentators like to constantly spew out these figures of something like 500 to 600,000 Ukrainian losses, with a rare few even stating 1 million AFU losses. And it is remarkably uncanny how the narratives that Russia pushes is much more often than not a reflection of their own situation instead. Then heading across to a bit of a funny to round it all off today, guys. So after a record-breaking number of economic sanctions against Russia since their invasion of Ukraine, Russia considers these sanctions illegal and undermining the international legal prerogatives of the UN Security Council, as stated by Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov in the past couple of days. Now, I'm going to bypass the irony of long-held Russian statements that simply stated sanctions don't work. So let's go even beyond that, because in this news piece, and in response to the sanctions, the Russian foreign minister is now creating and upping sanctions of their own, and particularly expanding the list of individuals who are banned from entering Russia. Meanwhile, I'm scratching my head wondering who would actually want to go to Russia at this point. And hey, while Russia is at it, they should start to ban any remaining Western product inflows, imports into their country as well. But I get the feeling that they don't want to go that far. So thanks for watching again, guys. You're all total champions. Thanks for sticking around and enjoying the show as we continue to point out these little Russian ironies. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.